All right. So thank you so much for sitting down with me today and talking about um, answering my questions and stuff like that.
My
So,
my pleasure. My pleasure, Chase.
all right. So my first question to ask you is, what, in your opinion, is the biggest issue that we as Utahns and we as Americans are facing today?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a couple of things I would say. First is the economy. I think that's the one that's hitting people's, that's what's on people's minds right now is the economy. What do I do about putting money in or putting gas in the fuel tank? How do I keep food on the table? How do I keep the braces on the kids? And Chase, I'm sure even you are feeling it as a high schooler. I'm sure you're feeling the pinch
Yeah.
of the economy, whether it's through your parents who maybe are talking about it, or even you as yourself as you try to go buy something or do something.
Yeah.
Something definitely This is definitely difficult for people. So I think the first issue people are dealing with is the economy and trying to figure out how do we get this thing turned back around? How do we make sure that people can keep more of their money and spend their money? How do we make sure that people have the prices come down? And yeah, I think that's the number one issue that's on people's minds.
Yeah. I mean, just going to fill up my car with gas is just insane. Like, I definitely feel it there.
Takes
So
all the fun out of going on a drive, doesn't it?
I know some days I'm just like, I'm not driving at all. I'm not
No,
ready to go pay all that
we,
money on my
we
gas.
just we just went to Oregon for a family vacation,
Really.
family reunion. And boy, when you're paying some of those places with $5.50 a gallon,
That's crazy.
it's crazy.
Yeah,
It sure makes a dent in people.
I know. Yeah, it's crazy. So my next question, I'm gonna ask you a little bit about, so a month ago, Roe v. Wade got overturned,
Mhm.
and there's been backlash from pro-choice advocates and then celebration from pro-life advocates like you and I. So what I'm wondering is, what are your thoughts on Roe v. Wade being overturned, and do you support Utah's trigger law that went into effect after Roe v. Wade got overturned?
Yeah, first, I do support the trigger law. I'm glad it is there. But as far as Roe versus Wade, I have to be honest with you. I'm kind of perplexed that there's so much unhappiness about it, because really what the Supreme Court did was said, this isn't for us to handle. This isn't for the 9 judges. This is definitely an issue for the states to decide. As you know, Supreme Court justices, we don't get to elect, we don't get to fire them. They're there till they retire or die.
Uh-huh.
Whereas as a state legislator, every 2 years you get to vote me in or out. And so put it back at the state where folks can be held accountable. Folks like me can be held accountable. So I think it's great legally, and then personally, I'm really glad too, because I think it should cut down on the number of unborn children who are killed. And so I've been grateful. I've praised God since the day it happened. I'm glad for this change.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So I'm just gonna, through the next couple questions, just bounce around through different issues. One of the biggest issues lately is we've seen a rise in mass shootings around the country. And a lot of people, their response to that, the way that they think they're going to fix it, is through red flag laws. What are your thoughts on red flag laws? And do
I
you
am
think?
not a fan of red flag laws. We don't need red flag laws, and I don't think they'll solve the issue, first of all. But I also think that it is terrible policy to because there are a few people over here who are doing things illegally, that the hundreds of millions of folks who are being legal need to pay the price, especially when, as I said before, red flag laws are not going to solve the issue. And I think we've seen that in many, if not all, of the recent shootings that you mentioned, Chase. The red flags would not have solved those issues.
Mhm.
We'd still have unfortunately unhappy depressed, angry young men go out and do that, and the red flags would not have stopped those.
Yeah. I just want to ask you, has there been any push in the Utah legislature for that, for red flag laws? Like any serious push?
Not since I've been there, I've not heard or seen any serious push. I mean, there's been obviously some discussion and people have brought it up, but nothing serious. And in fact, to the contrary, over the past couple of years, we made it so that if you have that you can carry with or without a concealed firearm permit. We've made it so that Utah's a sanctuary state. So to the contrary, I think we're supportive of the Second Amendment right to defend yourself. I laugh because I hear people say all the time, well, you don't need a high-powered rifle to go out and shoot a deer, or why do you need more than 3 rounds to go shoot a deer? Well, you know what? The Second Amendment's not about shooting deer. It's not about providing food for my family. It's about defending my family. Mm-hmm. And since the beginning of time, since man was placed on this earth, we've had the natural right to defend ourselves, to defend our families. That's what it's about. It's not about being able to provide for my family as a side benefit. That's great, but that's not what it's about. It's about defending oneself.
Yeah,
which is a natural right. It's a God-given right that no one, not even a government, has the right to take that away from me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with all that said, what do you believe is the solution for these mass shootings?
That's the $64,000 question, isn't it, Chase? What's the solution? Well, I think that we have to go back and say, okay, what's causing this? What's the problem? Well, from what I've read, what I've listened to, what I've seen, it is by and large angry, depressed, unhappy young men. Of which I was I'm a man. I was going to say young man. I used to be a young man. So I don't like having to say that, but that's the truth. So I think why are young men angry? What's going on in their lives? That's what we need to figure out, and that's what we need to address. And my again, as I've read, as I've studied this, I really think it's the breakdown of our family. It's the lack of, for too many, it's the lack of a male figure in their homes. It's it's something about that. I can't put my finger on all the particulars, but I think it's the breakdown of our family, and it's left these young men seeking, angry, needing attention, desperately needing attention, and so this is where they turn.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That I totally believe in that same thing that you said, that it comes down to the families. One of my last podcast episodes that I did with one of my friends, we talked about that and how that's the real problem, is family life and how you're brought up. So
I really think as a legislature, as a lawmaking body, we need to make sure that we do that we enact laws that help families, that strengthen families. We ought not ever pass laws that make it harder for a mom to be home with her kids. We ought never make it harder for a dad to be home with his kids. We ought never to make it make people be incentivized to have single parent families. I know that's going to happen. So I'm not. But we ought to always try to shoot for the optimum situation, and we need to make sure that we always support a woman to be with a man and to have a family where family dynamics can be good. I know there's problems sometimes in families, but by and large, being raised in a two-parent family is the research shows us over and over that that's the best situation for a child. That's why I think we're going to have the best chance for young men to grow up happy and not to be violent.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for that response. My next question has to do with safe and secure elections. We've seen, like in 2020, a lot of controversy over whether or not the 2020 election was stolen, or whether it was, and I mean, obviously there was fraud. It's inevitable. There's going to be fraud in most elections, whether it be a large amount or a very small amount. But what I'm asking you is what needs to be done here in Utah to ensure safe and secure elections?
That's a great question. And that's, I think, and I'm glad you posed it that way. What should we do to ensure safe and secure elections? I think we're much wiser to look forward than to look back. So I say this, and I wrote an opinion piece, I think it was in the Tribune or Desert News, I can't remember, last October or so, and I got hammered for it.
Mhm.
Because this is what I say: let's audit what we're doing. Let's take a real honest look at what we're doing, the processes now, and see what we need to be, what we can improve on. Audits are not. You don't do an audit because you're saying you're bad, and we want to make sure you're not doing that anymore. It's to look at a process and to make sure that the process is as safe and secure as it can be. That's why, Chase, I had a couple of bills that I passed this last session. One that requires a county clerk before each primary and before each general election to maintain the voter rolls, to make sure that folks who have passed away or moved away are removed from the rolls. I know it's not perfect yet, but it's a step towards this safe and secure election. I had another bill that said, if your ballot has been kicked out, it's been deemed, there was a problem with your signature matching the signature that the state has on file. Let's make sure that is rectified before it comes time for certification. Let's make sure that your ballot gets verified and counted. So those are a couple of things. I think there's still more that can be done to make sure that our elections are safe and secure. But I do think this last session, there were several bills that passed that will help ensure we have safe and secure elections. And if we don't have safe and secure elections, we're in a really bad way. And not only if we have them, but if the constituents, if the citizens feel we don't have a safe and secure election, we're also in a bad way, because then the likelihood of them voting is reduced. We need people to participate. We need the right candidates to be elected, and the only way that happens is by having everybody participate in the process. And we need to, and they're not going to participate if they don't feel like it's a legitimate process. So we've got to make sure that our processes are as safe and secure as they can be.
All right. So you mentioned in your first, when I asked you that first question, that our biggest problem, that you believe our biggest problem is the economy. What have you done already, or what will you do to address that problem in the Utah legislature?
So every time I've seen a bill, and I've been, you might know that I think I voted in my first session more no's than any other legislator. In the second session, I think I was the second. If a bill is redundant or too expensive or unconstitutional, I vote against it. So the first thing I would say is I vote against things that I think are just way too costly. We just don't get enough bang for the buck. The second is that I voted for tax breaks. Every time there was a tax break opportunity, I'm there. And even if there's a chance there was a bill about, when you do your car registration. Mm-hmm. There was the bill originally was going to charge you to have that registration mailed to you.
Really?
And I said, what are we doing? That's another tax. And I know it's only $1 a year, but it's another tax. Let's don't do that. So those are some things I've done so far. I believe I'm going to support this coming year. I think there's going to be movement towards removal of the sales tax on food. I just really think, Chase, that there are places that the government ought not be a part of. Mm-hmm. And if we could get out of more and more things, there's less need for money, less needs for taxes. So again, that's really what I'm looking for, is ways to not grow the government, because every time we grow the government, it just costs us more. So
yeah. All right. Thank you for that response. Now I kind of want to shift into your reelection campaign and just kind of look back at your first term. My question is, so, the last couple of years, well, not so much now, but back in 2020 and 2021, we had a lot of the COVID mandates, protocols, all that stuff. And that was a huge problem for a lot of Utahns and people from Cache Valley, especially for like me being in school and having school shut down and masks and all that. It was a lot. So what I want to ask you is, what did you do in the Utah legislature to combat some of those crazy mandates and protocols and stuff like that?
Yeah. Well, so the first year when the pandemic first started, I wasn't there. However, during my campaign, I spoke out I was pretty vocal about the fact that the government had overstepped its bounds, that our governor had overstepped his bounds. For me, when I think about local control, because that's the big phrase, you can't get more local than a family or an individual. I'm the most local. Let me make the choices. And I looked every day, Chase, at the state health department numbers. They have a website that showed hospitalizations and how many cases and how many deaths and what was the median age, all that kind of stuff. And it was clear to me. I mean, the median age of death was 74. That means half of the deaths were younger than 74 and half were older than 74. It was clear that we needed to protect the older people, but the younger folks were by and large okay. Mm-hmm. And if you looked at that, you also saw that by and large there were other circumstances in someone's life that was causing problems. They had diabetes, or they were obese, or other issues. So I kept saying that. I let the governor know in no uncertain terms that when we were during these last couple of years, as we were telling people, you have to get vaccinated, and I'm not anti-vax, okay? But as we tell people, you have to get vaxxed, you have to get vaxxed, you have to get vaxxed. Yet they said, wait a second, I just had COVID. I think I'm immune now. But we were saying, get vaccinated. I said, look, that sows the seeds of conspiracy, because it doesn't make sense. They say, man, for every other virus I've had, once I've had it, I'm immune. So why are we saying I have to get vaccinated even if I'm okay? And and why were we shutting down schools? 0 to 18 in our state, there are 928,000 kids 0 to 18. And if you watch the news or you listen to the press conferences, you'd have sworn that they were all in the hospital and they were dying. And that was not the case. We had very few children in Utah in the hospital. I mean, I think it was under 1,000 over the course of 2.5 years. Yeah. We had the numbers on their site show 5 or fewer, but I believe it's 2 passed away. And while I don't want anybody to die from this stuff, I don't think that the actions we were taking were commensurate with the risk. And so I was pretty vocal about it, that we, in fact, at the legislature, my first session there, I got in trouble a number of times because I wasn't wearing a mask. I had just had COVID over Christmas break. And then we started on January 5th, I believe it was. I wasn't wearing a mask. There was no reason to be wearing a mask. And I got called on the carpet several times by different people telling me, asking me, where's my mask? And I was like, I don't need a mask.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, all that stuff, just all the protocols were just crazy to me. I mean, like you said, the governor and just the federal government in a whole were just overstepping their boundaries when it came to COVID.
We'd have been far better off, I believe, Chase. We spent billions and billions and billions of dollars. We'd have been far better off, I think, to spend that money with the vulnerable population. I mean, if we've decided we're going to spend all these billions of dollars, let's spend it on the folks who are actually vulnerable. Uh-huh. We could have, I mean, they're just making up things, but we could have delivered food to everybody 60 year old if we wanted to. Mm-hmm. I mean, we spent billions doing other things that were irrelevant, but we could have spent money to make sure that folks who were 60 and older were entertained, were fed, were protected. Instead, we made third graders wear a mask and and shut down school, or made them try to learn via Zoom. It was the first few weeks, nobody really knew.
Yeah.
But it didn't take very long before we knew for real what was going on. And it wasn't, anyway.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, the first 2 weeks, we all thought it, like, didn't know what it was. And I just remember, like, obviously I was kind of worried, but then after a little while, I'm just like, it's like another sickness. It can spread like any other sickness, and we just got to learn to live with it.
And as people, we need to be more, we need to make sure that we worry, but we think about our community. So if I'm sick, I should stay home, and I should stay home. I should have stayed home 10 years ago if I was sick.
Yeah.
I shouldn't go to the office. But if I'm sick, I shouldn't go to church. I don't know that we need the governor saying churches are all shut down and you can't go to the grocery store and you can't go to this. No. Let's teach correct principles, and people will govern themselves.
Yep.
Now I know there's people who necessarily won't treat us all as well as they could or should, and that they'll be sick and they'll come out in public. But I don't know that I don't know that working so much on safety is worth giving up so much liberty.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just want to say thank you for pushing back against that and using your voice to push back on those protocols.
And so I was glad to vote, for example, by the way, when the Salt Lake School District was requiring their students to continue to wear masks.
Yeah.
And I was more than happy to vote to overturn that.
All right. Let's see. So my next question for you, you've probably been asked this hundreds times, same question, but what makes you the best candidate for the job? I mean, you've already served a term, you've done great things. Why should people give you another chance for a second term?
Yeah. Well, if you are concerned that government wants to grow, and that the tax base wants to grow, and finally that social issues are becoming out of control, then you need somebody who is conservative, and by conservative I mean somebody who wants to conserve Christian values and family values, who wants to conserve the beliefs of our founding fathers about a limited government. If that's what you want, then that's why you vote for me, because that's what I fight for all the time.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. So the first question I asked you was, what in your opinion is the biggest issue we as Utahns and Americans face? So I'm going to ask you, as you campaigned across Cache Valley so far, and even when you're campaigning for your first term, what is the biggest issue that voters are coming to you with and their biggest concerns, and how will you address that issue in your second term?
There were probably the biggest question I got asked was about Donald Trump. Probably the second was about Mitt Romney. Yeah. And then there was a lot of questions about what are we going to do to open up the government? Stop. I really think, Chase, that's why I really think that's why we won the first time and we won the second time, is because people now more than ever are saying, holy cow, the government can restrict my ability to do all kinds of things, including breathe even. And that scares people, as it should. And I really think those were really the biggest issues that I got asked about as we were out on knocking on doors and taking phone calls. I mean, there were some other things people were concerned about water and about growth and about transgender issues and gay issues, those kinds of things. But the idea about Romney and Trump were probably the highest.
That's crazy.
Mixed in with, like I say, and those were really about what's going to happen with government overreach, and then, like I say, then some of these other second tier things.
Yeah, I think that's funny though, that the top two things were on Donald Trump or Mitt Romney.
I probably got asked that question 2-1 over anything else.
Really? What
Mhm.
what would they ask specifically about then? Was it just,
Where do you stand with Donald Trump?
oh, just that simple question?
And then people, and then if it was about Romney, then they would ask that kind of thing. Where do you stand with Mitt Romney, or what are you gonna do to get rid of Mitt Romney?
Oh, all right. Yeah, that's kind of fun. I didn't expect you to say those two when I asked you that question. I was expecting something like inflation but yeah, that's kind of funny. But I mean, that is important to people because of the way that Mitt Romney's voted and stuff like that. But I have one more question for you, and I just want to know, what message would you give to people like me, like young conservatives, people who are speaking up about their conservative values and trying to make change? And what would your message be to people who are maybe worried to speak up and are like, they want to speak up, but they're scared of being ridiculed or mocked for their beliefs?
Yeah, Chase, you know what? I'm glad you bring that up, because that's I talk about that in many of my speeches over the last few months, because I worry that we're too scared. We're too nervous about saying how we feel, because yeah, it is scary. You don't know if somebody's going to reject you and call you racist or whatever. You know, we don't. Oh, anyway. They're gonna label you and shut you down, and it is a little scary. But I believe that by and large, most folks feel like we do. Most folks, they love the Constitution. Most folks want to have less government. I think most folks are worried about some of these social issues, but they don't. But they don't know if they can verbalize it. So what do? We talk about it. We take a chance and we talk about it. And it's okay if it's uncomfortable. Discussion and some discomfort is okay, even if we don't agree. It's okay. We never should back off. We should talk about how we feel about things and why we feel what we do, and just know this and keep this in our minds. This country was set aside on purpose. The founding fathers were inspired to write the documents. The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution did not just come out of their own brains. Those men were inspired. Let's not let that down. Let's support that, because if it was true then, it's true now. The same God that inspired them then can inspire us now. And we don't need to be scared. Let's just speak up, because these principles contained in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they are true, and they are principles that lead to life, liberty, and happiness.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you just said. When I started my podcast, I was one of those people. I was kind of scared that what would my friends think, or what would family think, or whatever. And I mean, I've had some friends be like, why don't you just give it up onto the politics? Why do you even care? They'll say stuff. But then I just remember that we have something to fight for. We have freedom to fight for. And so that really just motivates me to get going and continue to do this. But
if not you, then who?
yeah, that's the perfect question. So that was my last question. So I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me, because I'm sure you're very busy. But your insight on these issues and all that was really greatly appreciated. And so
thank you, Chase. I appreciate it. And if you ever have a question or anything else I can help with, you just let me know.
All right. Thank you so much.
Right.
I hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, me too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.